Welcome to the Navigating Life and Leadership podcast. On your journey of life, you will experience many ups and downs, and through it all, you will influence others along the way. Believe it or not, that makes you a leader. Guided by Scripture, our podcast aims to help equip you to navigate the twists and turns of your life while faithfully fulfilling this call of leadership. Welcome to the Navigating Life and Leadership podcast, coming to you from First Baptist Church O'Fallon in O'Fallon, Missouri. I'm your host, Julie Newman. Today's episode begins a new series that we're going to be doing throughout the year on finances. Specifically, our episode today is on personal finances. We're joined today with Rusty Lewis, who has a lot of expertise in this area. Welcome to the podcast, Rusty.
It's good to be here, Julie.
Great. Can you share a little bit about your background, your experience, so people have a little understanding of...
Happy to do it. You used the word expertise there.
I did.
I'm not sure that we're going to find that to be true. We'll see. It's hard to believe. It's been 23 years, but I have worked in a consulting role, primarily with churches around the United States in the topics or the areas of stewardship and generosity. I do some work with faith-based nonprofits, Christian schools, and the like that. But that's been my heart. That's my ministry.
Wow.
Helping churches grow greater cultures of giving in the life of the ministry. We do a lot of raising of funds when the church is needing to build or pay off a debt or plant new churches, whatever the case may be. But I've also had then just as a side interest in personal finance. My mom was a school teacher. She taught accounting and business. And was influential in my growing up of just how to manage money. I've led Financial Peace University classes for almost 15 years. And I actually spent some time at the Ramsey organization earning a certification that they have as a financial coach. Love working with individuals on the topic like that. I've done some work with Crown, not as much, teaching their material, but that's just a personal interest I've had. I'm the nerd in the family. I like spreadsheets and numbers, and so it's a place where I spend a little bit of my time and energy.
I like spreadsheets too. Okay. They're wonderful. So
nerds
I guess I'm a little bit of nerd too. I wanted to ask first, before we get going, is what does the Bible have to say about personal finances? I know we don't hear a lot about it in church typically, or even in schools a lot. So I think it's really important to get a foundational from the biblical perspective and then also from the practical one. Yeah,
very true. Unfortunately, it's not taught in most schools today, and that's unfortunate. We've probably heard, that the Bible has over 2,000 verses. Related to money and possessions, or a third of the parables that Jesus shared had to do with money and finance. Specifically, though, when it comes to what we'll talk about today, just planning and budgeting, those kinds of things. Proverbs 21:5 is the first one on my list. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who's hasty comes only to poverty. It speaks to planning, the idea of thinking ahead. Luke 14:28, for which of you desiring to build a tower, right? You know this verse, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it. Again, speaking to planning. We'll talk a little bit about debt later. Proverbs 22, the rich rules over the poor, the borrower's slave to the lender. That doesn't sound pleasant. And we'll talk some about giving, not today. Stewardship, it's a topic for another day, but Proverbs 3, honor the Lord with your wealth. And with the first fruits of all your produce. So the Bible has a lot to say about money and possessions, and specifically about, I think, our responsibility to plan well, to steward well. There's a bigger picture, though. I think before we talk anything else about money, it's just always, I think, for me, the grounding, the foundation is that everything we have, the understanding that everything we have, everything that we've been given, anything we've earned, it's all God's.
Absolutely.
He owns it all. And we have a responsibility to manage that well. And that's where a lot of what we see in Scripture spends time. Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, in the world and all who live in it. Deuteronomy 10, to the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. And then Psalm 50, God speaking, for the world is mine and all that is in it. So Well, our topic today is not stewardship, right? I think we would agree that we're foolish if we don't plan well.
Yes, absolutely.
To manage that which God's provided.
Absolutely. We do, hopefully we'll get you back to do one specifically on stewardship, because that could be a whole podcast in and of
We'll
itself,
see.
I think.
After this, you may not want to hear from me.
Oh, no, I assure you, we will. Okay, so you gave a really great foundation. Biblically speaking, we need to be mindful of the resources and the gifts that God gives us, because everything is His. So from a practical perspective, what would you say the first thing somebody should do? And I'm going to challenge, I know a lot of the young people, kind of this is very good for them to get started with it, but I would also suspect a lot of people, haven't really thought about some of these things, who are a little further along in their life cycle and that kind of stuff. So I think it is very important to have that practical understanding of what is the first thing we should do.
Yeah, let's first of all say that anything I'm going to share today is probably not original to Rusty.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of what I'm going to share actually comes right out of Dave Ramsey's work through Financial Peace. It's a good program. It's not the program.
Right.
It's a program, but it's good. It's systematic. It's simple. I wish I would have learned this at an earlier age.
Yeah. Me too.
I can tell you where it started for me. I actually picked up a copy of Ramsey's book. I don't remember which version or which title it was at that time, but we were on a flight, Andrea and I, to celebrate our 10th anniversary when I read the book, and I was captivated by, oh my gosh, we need to be doing this. Should have learned that in my teens or 20s, but unfortunately for us, it was early 30s before that happened. I will tell you, just as a side note, that as we had 2 kids, we required that they go through Financial Peace as high schoolers. They just came and kind of audited the class as I was leading it in the church. And then as they both got engaged, we encouraged, couldn't force, but we really encouraged that they would go through the program again with their fiance.
Yeah.
You can't learn it too early, but there's something in anything we'll talk about today, and some we'll get into detail, some not, that applies no matter whatever stage of life you're in.
Correct.
So it's never too early and it's never too late to start. So what's the first thing we should do? The first number one thing, if you don't have it, create an emergency fund.
Okay.
And that fund should have at least $1,000 in it. It's critical. Something's going to happen. You don't know what it is. But if you don't have that emergency fund in place to cover that unexpected expense, then you're forced to borrow.
Yeah.
And that leads you down a rabbit hole you don't want to go. So creating an emergency fund is step one. And really concurrently with that is the idea of creating a monthly plan. Okay. People hate the B word.
I do.
It's the budget. But if you have a plan for your money, everything else is going to fall in line. So why is an emergency fund important? I did a little research knowing that we were going to talk today. This was actually encouraging to me. This number's lower than it was a few years ago. 37% of Americans say they would have trouble paying an unexpected, immediate $400 emergency.
Yeah.
$400 doesn't seem like a lot,
right?
But 37% of Americans say they'd have a hard time paying that if it happened today. Now, a few years ago, that number was 47%. So it's better than it was. But half of Americans recently surveyed said it would be very difficult or somewhat difficult to cover an unexpected bill of $1,000. Well, what happens if you have an emergency and you don't have money in the bank to cover?
Right.
You've got to borrow. I went back and looked at our checkbook. Last January in the Lewis household, the blower went out on our heating unit. It was January.
Yeah.
That's an emergency.
It is.
$600 to get it repaired. Summer of 23, hailstorm. The church was hit with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
A bunch of us were hit with hailstorm. Total roof replacement at our house. You think, got insurance for that, right? Yeah. But there's a deductible on the insurance. And so something's got to be done. I will tell you, when those things happen, but you have that money set aside in reserves, there's no stress.
Right.
It's frustrating.
That peace, a little bit of peace,
It's so much more peaceful. You know it's going to occur, but the stress is gone when you have the money in the bank to cover the unexpected expense.
Yeah.
It's just a life changer. Now, the second part of that is the idea of creating a plan, a budget. Well, why should we do that? Don't let me get bogged down on the stats. These are scary. Total household debt in America, $17.8 trillion as of the second quarter of this year. And that's up 10% over the previous year. Credit card debt alone makes up 1.1 trillion of that number. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, personal consumption spending, the fun money, was up 6% over 2022. So people are spending more, right? And spending increased in every category that they track.
Really?
Except for two. This should alarm pastors that are listening. People spent less money in 2023 on smoking, tobacco products. That's good.
That's good. That's a good thing.
But they spent less on cash contributions.
Oh.
Charitable giving was down 13.7% in 2023. But in all other areas, spending was up. Savings is down. The amount we're saving, spending is going up. Okay, why is it important to have a budget? Well, let's talk about relationships.
Okay.
It used to be number one. Number two reason for divorce today, arguments about money. Number one is infidelity.
Okay.
But number two
it used to be number one.
It used to be number one. According to the last thing I was reading in this research, it's now number two. Still not good. Half of the couples with $50,000 or more in debt cite money as their number one reason for argument. Being dishonest about money, hiding purchases from your spouse severely damages trust in a relationship. It leads to divorce. So how do I avoid arguments with my spouse?
Right.
How do I avoid the debt trap that's creating a plan? The idea that there's a monthly budget. You don't have to do a full year. Just do it month by month.
Okay.
Here's what I anticipate earning. Here's the money coming in. And then list your expenses, the outgo.
Okay.
Mandatory expenses first, things you have to pay, right? And then those discretionary things I'd like to spend if I have the money to do it. Now, the first thing, again, not today's topic, but the first line of that budget should be giving.
Okay, good. I was glad you said that.
For those of us who are Christ followers, if you don't plan to give, you won't.
Right.
It's going to end up being the last thing you do, and you want it to be the first thing you do. Some people say, I can't afford to give. There's not enough money left at the end of the month. No, there is. You just have to prioritize it.
Right.
It has to be the first thing you plan. What would it look like for us as believers if we let our giving govern our spending rather than allowing our spending to govern our giving? It's a matter of making it priority, making it first. So I would tell folks, don't expect God to bless what he's given you if you're not going to honor him with first fruits. And again, we can go back to Scripture, Proverbs 3:9, and look at that again. So after giving, first thing in my budget, then saving. I want to set some money aside. I got to get that emergency fund in place, right? Then after saving, my mandatory expenses, housing, utilities, food, and then discretionary items. That's the process of starting the budget.
I think that's really good. I really like that you mentioned tithing. I know we're going to have a whole nother podcast where we're going to talk more about that because that's a very interesting topic. I was one of those people for a long time. I'll just give you a little snippet. And then I really got where I was convicted about my tithing. And now I'm at a point where very quickly God showed me, it's like I can't afford not to tithe. So it's not I can't afford to tithe, but it's really, can you afford not to tithe? And that's where I believe we are as Christians.
It's a discipleship issue first and foremost. It's a heart issue first and foremost. And then when people get the heart, then they get into the question of, well, wait a minute, I want to, but I don't think I can afford to. And that's where these plans can help. Help that happen.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Okay, now that we've got a little bit of budgeting plan, we've got some saving going on, that emergency fund identified, what would you say the next thing someone should do in their planning their finances?
Get after the debt. Yep. Pay off your debt, every single debt you have except the mortgage.
Okay.
Is step two.
So you're excluding the mortgage from that?
Yep.
Okay.
We'll get to it later.
Okay.
Right there, I think in Dave's plan, there's 7 or 8 baby steps, and his first 3, emergency fund, debt's number 2.
Okay.
Average consumer debt as of 2024, about $23,000.
Yeah.
That's average. That's up from $21,000 a couple of years ago. If you include mortgages, the average is over $100,000 that people have in debt. As Americans, I think the average American holds about 4 credit cards.
Yeah.
Average balance is around $8,000. No, that's not right. $7,200. All my numbers are running together. The fact is we have debt. We've got to get out of it. We've got to reduce it as quickly as we can. So how can you do it? A lot of ways. There's a lot of argument around, should I take the one debt that has the highest interest rate and pay it off first or whatever? What Dave would teach is that you would list your debts smallest to largest.
Okay.
No matter what they are, credit cards, home loans, I'm sorry, not mortgages, home equity lines of credit, car loan, boat loan, whatever you owe, list them smallest to largest. And you're making the minimum payment on each one.
Yeah.
And then you're throwing as much to the first one as you can. So once I have the $1,000 saved, any extra money I have, I'm putting toward that first debt and paying it off. And as soon as I pay that debt off, I take the amount of money that I was paying on that one, and I then throw it to the second one. So not just the minimum payment on the second one. Now it's the minimum payment plus what? So they call it a snowball. The more I do this, I have more and more money to throw at each debt.
Right.
And you're trying to knock those down as quickly as you can. It brings up this question. How do I do that, Rusty? There's more month left at the end
money.
of my
That's what my mom used to always say, more month than money.
So there's really only two things that can happen.
Yeah.
If you've got a little bit more month left at the end of your money, either you've got to increase your income or you've got to reduce the outgo.
Right.
I mean, ideally, a combination of the two, right, would even be better. So what do I do to reduce my outgo? Well, first of all, again, list your mandatory expenses. You've got to pay your rent. You've got to have food, right? You got to pay your utility bill. But then list your discretionary expenses. Literally go back and look over the last 3 months. Where has my money gone?
Yeah.
And what you're going to realize is that there's an awful lot of discretionary spending there. Eating out. Hey, Melissa's love to eat out.
Yeah.
Money we spend on subscriptions.
Right.
Right. I'm subscribed to this. I'm subscribed to that. Where can I make changes? And this is not fun. We're having to say no to things that we like spending our money on. But most of us have done this before. If you own a home, you've done this before.
Yeah.
If you have kids and started a college savings fund, you've done this before, right? I want to buy a house. That means I'm going to need a down payment. Oh, I better start saving for the down payment. So what do? You say no to things that you've liked to spend money on because this is more important, right? For a season, I'm saying no to that so I can say yes to this.
Right.
That's what you're doing here. It's no different.
Yeah.
It's not as fun because you're not getting to buy a house at the end of it. You're just paying down debt. But when you get out of debt, you're going to realize, ooh, this is fun.
Yeah.
So make that happen. So reduce outgo, increase income. Depending on the job, depending on where a person works, they might be able to go to their employer and say, is there some overtime I could take on? Is there some other thing I could do to earn a little extra here? Maybe it's taking on a side gig. And this opportunity is huge today compared to where it was when I started this process. So whether you're driving for Lyft or Uber or Instacart, I saw the FedEx guy when I was leaving the neighborhood today. I mean, I know they take on seasonal work for UPS drivers, right? Not that you're driving, but you're just helping them process the packages. Now, by the time people hear this, that seasonal work's over. But there are just different times of the year when I could I could mow yards.
Yeah.
I could push snow. That's a way to create income that allows me to accelerate my ability to save my emergency fund and then pay down the debt. Hey, we can also sell stuff.
That's true.
There's stuff in the attic. There's stuff in the basement. Again, putting it up for sale, it creates income. There's ways to do this.
Yeah.
And none of it's fun, but if you do it, the back end ends up being a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think you gave some really good practical examples of that, of things that they can do. Yeah, you're right. It's not fun, but it is important to do. I remember
taking our medicine. We got ourselves into debt. We got to get ourselves out.
Absolutely.
And it's the easiest thing to do is to get into debt. One of the hardest things to do is to get out of debt.
Right. And the credit card companies don't want you out of debt. It's because that's where they make the money. So they love they keep upping your minimum limits or your maximums. Like, no, don't accept that.
Have you seen where the rates are now on interest if you're not making your payment?
No, I haven't looked.
Oh, it's over 20%, 23, 24, 25% now on a credit card.
Yeah.
And so it's just becomes a sinking hole that you can't get out of. You've got to
get rid of it. Okay, let's talk about one more. What would be a third thing, and then we'll move on to another topic.
Some people may have these first two checked off.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got 1,000 in savings. I'm good for there.
Yeah.
I don't have any credit card. I don't have any debt other than my mortgage.
That's great.
Awesome. Oh, well, then what should I be doing? Build the emergency fund now to 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And that's a pretty big range, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. Okay, which number is it?
Yeah.
My answer to folks on that is dependent upon how secure their income is. Andrea and I are, I think, a great example. Before she retired, I'm incredibly jealous, but before she retired, she was a school teacher.
Okay.
That's a pretty secure income.
Yeah.
You know, she was in a role that's needed. It's not like there's an overabundance of educators. They're looking for teachers. Her income was very secure. Mine, on the other hand, I'm an independent contractor.
Yeah.
I work with a church or a nonprofit. My contract runs about 6 months with them.
Yeah.
So I'm always 6 months from being unemployed. Very insecure income. So the Lewises would have at least 6 months of living expenses in our emergency account in case 2001 there was no work in the world I live in. 2008 and 9, everything shut down when it came to the work I do. Yeah. In 2000, well, we're missing one. Oh, COVID. Hello, 2021. Totally, income stopped in the world I lived in. So to have that emergency fund, again, no stress.
Yeah.
No stress because we knew things were covered. Didn't like it. Didn't like dipping into it.
Right.
But it's there. Now, if you're married and both in the family have very secure jobs, you're probably going to be okay with 3 months. And then you can go on to the next, which we won't get into the other baby steps there. But then you move on to step 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Okay. Wonderful. I think those are some really good practical things that we can do. Before we leave, though, you've talked about how to kind of keep the money that you have. Let's also talk about protecting that kind of long term. So do you have any advice for people who, now out of debt, they want to maintain that and think about the future, not just the current, but how can they go about protecting themselves?
Yes. There's 2 areas here. And again, this is stuff that will be covered in later steps. One is insurance.
Okay.
I mean, right out of the gate, again, when we're building our emergency fund, if you don't have health insurance, you need it. I think that's still the number one killer of causes people into bankruptcy. Yeah. Is an unexpected health expense, whether you're in an accident or have some, heaven forbid, diagnosis that you're not expecting. So definitely have, and the government's made getting health insurance somewhat more doable. Yeah. There's some great tax advantages if you get a high deductible health insurance account, set up an HSA, health savings account. Some great tax benefits from that, but get health insurance in place. Life insurance, if you're married, if you have dependents, right? Now, some don't need that in the current stage of their life, but others of us do. And so having life insurance, even if you're young, it's so inexpensive to get basic term life insurance. I had a friend who diagnosed with cancer. Had he not had life insurance before that diagnosis, it would have been almost impossible and so cost prohibitive to get it after the fact.
Yes.
So get it in place, get a long-term coverage in place so that if something like that happens, you're still covered with your life insurance. Disability insurance, you mentioned earlier, is important. I have read that it's probably more likely you'll have a disabling issue that disability insurance would cover before you're going to have an end-of-life occurrence, right? And so the importance of having disability insurance is there. That protects my position so that if something unexpected happens, I'm covered.
Right.
It's not going to wreck my financial future. And then the importance of having a will.
Okay.
Now, again, end of my life, but what's that do to my heirs, right? 65% of Americans do not have a will.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me.
Shocking. It's shocking.
Unfortunately.
Now, what that means is, hey, I don't have a plan for what happens into my life. Hey, my kids are going to get it. Well, they may, but the state's going to determine what happens, and you may not like the state's plan. That not only has to do with your assets, but that has to do with your kids.
Yeah.
Hey, mom and dad are my parents are going to maybe your parents are going to get your kids, or maybe not. Yeah. You're not going to get to make that decision. Yeah. So the important and setting up a will. Super easy, super inexpensive to do. Now, you and I would agree an estate plan is way better.
Very much
for
so.
certain people in different stages of life. There's some great tax advantages to that. Hey, that's another conversation. Yeah. But at the least, get a will in place. Let's talk about estate planning a little bit later, right? That could be a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, which it probably will. A lot of the things that we're touching on here could be a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. Yes, you could spend a lot of time on every one of these topics, right? We're just scratching the
Stewardship,
surface.
Tithing, estate planning, all of those things are. Yep. And I really like that you brought out the fact that you need to. It's not the same for everybody, so you need to look at your personal situation and make the wisest decisions that you have based on what you need to protect.
Right. And we're not financial planners.
No, not at all.
We're not insurance experts, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, don't take anything that you're hearing here to say, oh, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But it's hopefully a motivation to say, I need to learn more.
Yes.
Let me go find something and let me touch base then with a professional in these areas to say, okay, based on my situation, what should I do?
Yeah.
I will say, going back to the financial peace thing, anybody, no matter stage of life, can benefit from content that's there. I've just seen it too many times with too many families over the years to see the win for that.
Great. Wonderful. I think this has been great information for our audience. Before we close, is there anything else that maybe we didn't talk about that has come to mind that you want to share?
Nothing new. Okay. Just get after it.
Get after it.
Don't wait. Don't wait. Start. Maybe that's a Christmas gift. Well, again, we're doing this is going to play after Christmas probably. Right. We're recording right before Christmas, but go out, get the book, seek help, sign up for a class. Yeah. We do financial peace usually here at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. Brandon and Alyssa usually run that program. Sometimes I chip in and help with some of the classes there. Yeah. But just start. I wish I would have started earlier than I did.
Oh, I do too. Absolutely. Yep. Makes such a big difference.
It does.
So I want to thank you, Rusty, for joining us for this episode of the Navigating Life and Leadership podcast. I want to also thank you, our audience. Until our paths cross again, remember to keep God as your true north, and He will guide your path. Where God guides, He provides. If you want to learn more, or you're looking for a new church home, we invite you to First Baptist Church O'Fallon. Information is available on our website at www.firstofallon.com, or you can contact us directly by emailing leadership@firstofallon.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you won't miss future episodes.